So, I want to tell you a story of my calling. In fact, it was the first time I heard the audible voice of God. And I didn't recognize it, so I ran away from it. There's a reason I'm sharing this story. I'll tell you later, but it was 1992 winter. I was in a place called Makapala, Kona, Hawaii Islands. Beautiful place. I was at a counseling school, and it was winter. I remember every lecture phase, there was a break in the morning. Lecture will start around 9 and it will break around 10:30. And that's the time I would use the restroom because normally early morning, the restrooms would be packed with people. And I would just choose that break time to go. I remember there was one break time I left the lecture hall and went to the bathroom. It was a building next door, and nobody was in the men's restroom. And as I finished my business and I was washing my hands and looking at the mirror, I, I felt time stopped. Suddenly, everything stopped. Even my body froze. It was like the movies when everything stops. Literally, I couldn't move. My eyes couldn't move. My mouth and my hands, I was completely stuck looking at myself in the mirror. And out of my mouth came the voice of God. I didn't speak it, but it was the voice of God coming out from my mouth. And the Lord said exactly, I have called you to minister to my people. That was it. And then a few seconds later, my body defrosted and defreezed. And I was awakened from this encounter. And to be honest, I did not know what was happening. I had no idea God was speaking to me. I just thought this is a very strange experience. So I just kind of left. I left the bathroom, went back into the lecture hall, didn't tell anybody. I think another week passed and I was at the lecture hall going to use the restroom the next door. Um, Same, I was washing my hands and looking at the mirror. Nobody was in the bathroom. Same thing happened. My body froze and time froze. I felt like I was there but not there. I was watching myself in the mirror. I couldn't do anything, but my mouth spoke again. It was the voice of God. It was the same message. I have called you to minister to my people. The second time I heard it, I recognized it was the voice of God. I knew this was God speaking to me. Um, but the moment my body defroze and I was able to come back to myself, I collapsed to the floor of the bathroom and I cried. And I said, no, no, God, no. I said, no, no, and I cried for a few minutes and I gathered myself and went back to the lecture. And I tried to forget this. I told nobody, not even my parents, my best friends, my family, um, because I was planning to go to a pre-med school, join my sisters in New York. My eldest sister was already studying her doctorate. My second sister, she was um, studying pre-med, and I was going to join her, and I wanted to be a doctor. And I promised God that I'll be a doctor, make lots of money, and give you lots of money, and send money to missions and all that. But when he spoke those words the second time, I understood what he was asking me. He was asking me to give up my plans to go to New York, plans to join my sisters, study pre-med and to be a doctor, and be a full-time minister. Whether it's going to mission field or being a pastor, I had no idea. But I knew that God was putting a brake on my plans, and I wasn't going to let that happen. Many people would say, "Oh, silly you, he spoke to you twice." Yes, he did. But the fact is, I didn't know who God was. He spoke to me. Yes, I heard his voice. My spirit knew beyond the shadow of a doubt it was God's voice. And the experience itself was so supernatural, I was shaken by it. But because I did not know who he was, I was hesitant, unable to respond to his voice. The reason I want to share this story is many people want to hear God. They ask, they even come to me and ask for prayer, and sometimes God speaks. But rarely do I see people excited and embrace it and take it by faith and walk out the voice that they heard from God. And I think the reason that happens is, for me, there is no relationship. There is no knowing. I do know God exists. I had an experience with God and he spoke to me, but I don't know who he is. I have no idea. Is he strict? Or is he like a grandpa who just gives candies to his kids? Or is he like a judge who is always looking to judge? Or is he kind? Is he loving? I had no idea because I did not have a personal, in-depth relationship with him. Of course, I went to church. Of course, I worshiped. Of course, I believed in him. But I did not know who he was. You know, when Moses went up to the mountain, Mount Sinai, and met with God, God gave them commands and God gave them everything and promises. But there's a specific verse in the Bible where Moses asks, "We don't know you. I want to know your ways." Meaning, I want to know how you do things. I want to know who you are. Yes, you've delivered us from Egypt. Yes, you are great. Yes, you have such power that the mountains shake and the thunder roars and the mountain burns on the top. Yes, you've given us commands what to do, what not to do, but we don't know who you are. What are your ways? Therefore, God spoke to Moses and revealing that I am compassionate and gracious, slow to anger, and loving and kind. He repeated this many times to tell him who he was. I believe many times we long for the voice of God, but when he speaks, it's like, oh, that wasn't my plan. Well, I had no idea you were going to say that. Of course, because God says in Isaiah 55, my thoughts are higher than your thoughts. My plans are higher than yours. Means it's better, it's best. But to get there, not only do we need to hear his voice, but we need to trust who he is. The question is, do you trust God? You're asking for direction, you're asking for the will of God, but do you trust him enough when he says something that you don't understand? It was not in your plans. You're afraid to do it, but you will have faith and trust him and take that step because you know who he is. Because you know you have a relationship with him and he has proven to you faithful. He's gracious and loving and kind, slow to anger, abounding in righteousness and love. I want to share this story so that you would not make a mistake when you hear the voice of God, whether it's through prayer, through supernatural encounters, through the word of God, or through tongues or prophecies. Your spirit knows God speaking to you because we are made that way. Our spirit comes from God. He breathed it into, he didn't say birds appear, sea appear. That he said it. He spoke and everything appeared. For men, he made men with his hands, the dust of the earth, like clay. And he breathed life, his spirit, into ours, and we became a living soul. So our spirit recognizes God's spirit. Undoubtedly, when you hear his voice, the question is, when you hear his voice, will you obey it? For me, I didn't. I ran away for a few years until I said yes, until he convinced me that he was good, that he was trustworthy. And knowing God is probably much better and much more important than hearing from him. Because if you don't know him and you hear his voice, it's very hard to have faith and follow. That's why Abraham is such a great man. He had no idea who this God was. When he first came and said, leave everything and go. There's no destination, just leave and go. But he believed by faith. That's why by faith he was made righteous before God. He didn't know who he was, but he still believed and took a step of faith and went, left everything and went, not knowing where he was going. That's great faith. But most people struggle when they hear from God to take a step of faith because they don't know who God is. So the reason I want to share this story with you is that I don't want you to make this mistake of saying no to God or running away, because his plans are much higher and greater and best. His dreams for you are beyond your imagination. That's why we have to say yes. But in order to say yes, when he guides us and leads us and when he speaks to us, we need to know who he is. And we need to know that he is good, that he is kind, that he is loving. He's slow to anger, abounding in loving kindness. So my next story will be about knowing God. Take care. God bless.